Hello, I'm Dean and I'm a self-builder at Graven Hill in Bicester, Oxfordshire, building our new family home. In case you've not heard of Graven Hill, it's a housing development with an emphasis on self-build. So there are hundreds of self-build plots here and an ever-growing community of self-builders. The community aspect is pretty unique and certainly one of the best parts of Graven Hill. So I thought it would be interesting to talk to some of the other self-builders here and share some of their stories. I've started off talking to Simon Loo, who has built a 4-bedroom family home. So here we go, my first ever attempt at an interview. So I'm doing this interview via Zoom. It's intended to be possibly an audio only version too, so we'll try and be as descriptive as possible. And I started off at the home of Helen and Simon, who were one of the first houses to finish, I think, at Graven Hill. But I think it's fair to say one of the social hubs of Graven Hill as well. So hi, Simon. Thanks for doing this interview.
Hi, Dean. Thanks for setting this up. Yeah, who knows? We have COVID to thank, I suppose, for carving out a little bit of time to start something.
And I should point out that I have actually been to your house, but I'll try and act a little bit surprised when you're describing it to me.
Sure.
And so you moved in about a year and a half ago?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, sort of just before Christmas, we moved in.
Yeah, so Christmas 2018-ish.
That's right. Yeah.
And so you're fully settled into Graven Hill life and currently working on a bit of landscaping and stuff at the moment?
That's right, yes. Yeah, so we moved in just before Christmas last year. We only had one power outlet in the lounge, dining, kitchen, but that was enough. We would have decent light, so that was okay. I mean, the kitchen and fridge and everything worked, and obviously water is connected, and we were okay. It was good to be in the house.
It's kind of a self-builder thing, isn't it? You kind of live without some of the essentials to begin and get in, because it's just, the pressure to move in is quite high.
It is very high. Yes, we before we were able to move in, we had to do a bit of sofa surfing with friends all around Bicester. We have 2 kids and a dog, and our friends were very gracious to take us in for various amounts of time. We were basically 3 months before we were able to move in. So going back to the very beginning of this whole journey for you guys, how did you even come to hear about Graven Hill in the first place? Yeah, so my wife and I and our 2 kids and our dog were living in Switzerland, and we moved there in the late 2000s. And that's where we had a family and a dog as well. And so anyway, long and short is that we needed to move back to the UK for family reasons, for extended family reasons, and we started looking. And at the beginning, we were looking to sort of the west of the UK, sort of Bristol area, looking at, and at that time there was this move to, right to self-build and all that kind of thing going on in Parliament, but knowing how it is, these things take years to get into reality. And I dug a little deeper and saw Graven Hill, and saw that it was
you actively looking for self-build. It was something that was on your radar at that point.
Yes, sorry, yeah. I'll just mention that we did build a house in Switzerland already, but it wasn't a complete self-build. It was what's called a turnkey. So we went and specified with a house builder, and then they tried to build something that is as close as possible to what we imagined. So that's what we did in Switzerland, and that sort of really whet my appetite to do something else. And when I'm moving back to the UK, I was thinking that I would really like to have a modern house because of how lovely it is to live in a home that is warm, light, low energy consumption, and so on and so forth. I thought surely there is a way we could do this. So I
So,
stumbled onto
so
Graven
the
Hill.
typical housing market doesn't really provide
No,
that in general. There are always exceptions, but in general, it doesn't provide the sort of things that you're talking about.
absolutely. I mean, in general, the house builders are building basically the same house, you know, a million times over the course of the UK. There's some variations, but largely it's the same kind of house, except it's probably gets smaller every time with each iteration. Um, and I know the air tightness, the the energy efficiency is not always the best. They hit the minimum standards, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. And so you came across Graven Hill because you were searching for self-build, and then so you've gone for a really nice corner plot. Was that plot something that was sort of immediately jumped out at you? Was there something about that that really appealed to you?
Living in Switzerland, we're especially sensitive to which way the sun shines and in what time of day. See, Switzerland is very hilly, mountainous. The differences in amount of light, amount of sunshine, has a huge effect on house prices. Actually, if you live on the wrong side of the valley, you get a lot of shade, and that goes into the productivity of the farmland, the amount of heat you need. So there is some real financial consequences. Now, of course, the UK is not quite that hilly in most places. So, or mountainous, I would say, with obviously exceptions in Wales and Scotland. But by and large, you know, you get decent amount of sunshine wherever you are. So because of that sensitivity, I was very attuned to wanting a west-facing plot. And that's when I came across this plot that we're on now. And
So that
there's
gives you
another
sort of
reason why.
the evening sunshine,
Correct.
basically.
Yeah. So anywhere from the afternoon onwards, um, you know, gives us that really the stronger sunshine and also being able to enjoy the light in the evening, even when the sun sets.
Yeah.
You know, you still have the dusk to look out to.
Yeah.
And that is the criteria that I used to look for a plot when I was first started. And we stumbled onto this one and saw that there are a couple of things that I think is unique in that it's a quarter plot, but it's quite a shallow but wide plot. And most British houses are built for narrow but deep plots. And I knew how to build for this kind of plot. And it would fit our lifestyle perfectly because I love big windows. So, and that's one of the features that was going to make this house. So that's the reason I chose this plot.
And you had the views over sort of the base of Graven Hill, which, and because it's on the edge of the development, you knew that wouldn't be then developed any further in front of you. So you knew exactly what sort of views you were going to get at that stage.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And so how, at that stage, then how were you kind of looking to finance this? Were you able just to fully finance it? Were you going to have to look at sort of self-build mortgages, that sort of thing?
We explored self-build mortgages as well, but we were going to finance with the house sale in Switzerland. And it just so happens that as we were making the decision to move back to the UK, the vote to leave the European Union came through, and that actually meant that whatever sales we made in Switzerland was going to be worth quite a bit more moving back to the UK. And so that had actually ultimately financed a large part of our bill. But self-built mortgages were still new at the time, and it still is new. And we were hoping to avoid it where possible.
Yeah.
Um,
It's so tricky. The timing of a self-build is so crucial, isn't it? Because they say the market can fluctuate. If you're selling a house, prices going up and down, very difficult to really plan for it. You kind of have to just make a best guess at the time and then keep working with it and just keep on top of it. It's really difficult to know for sure.
I have scenarios on how much to kit out the house and what standard, so that I could have some kind of reasonable range, knowing that when it comes to building a house, um, the variability is great, and you always need to save quite a good chunk for contingencies.
Yeah. Did you have an overall budget in mind that you were going to have to work to?
Yes, I did have a overall budget in mind of build costs of, um, given what I know from these costs of things, and some things are really difficult to predict. Labor costs sometimes is very difficult to predict, depending on the labor market for construction. Materials and products are a lot easier to predict. So the price of a kitchen tap and the price of a door doesn't vary as greatly. But contingencies for problems, it's very difficult to predict. That is why having a good chunk set apart is necessary to help you overcome unforeseen problems.
Yeah.
So we set aside around £350,000, £375,000 or so for the house itself.
On top
And
of
so
the
I
plot
plan,
and the golden brick. Yeah.
yeah, that's on top of the cost of the land and all of that.
Yeah.
So as a way to plan for, possible, whatever the ultimately the quality of fittings and so on and so forth. So that had to come out of that budget.
Yeah, I've certainly found that you can divide your budget up, and then when it comes to it, you just have to dial back the quality or the spec, or you can increase it if you're really lucky to be in that position. You have to sort of maintain that flexibility. You can have a big contingency, and that's obviously sensible, but at the end of the day, if you've got a contingency and you haven't used it, you can then spend it on slightly sort of higher spec. So just having that variation, that ability to adapt is really important, I think.
And it's really good to have some, two couple levels of finish that you and the great thing about self-build is that you can decide on how to spend that. You can say, right, you know what? I'd love to have this, but this is going to actually add on quite a bit more cost. I'll design this out so that I can have a much better quality window, let's say, instead of having this fancy whatever feature happen to be. Maybe, you want a skylight in every room, and but that's going to add tons more costs. You have the cost of the product, as well as maybe it's difficult to install, so on and so forth. It can really balloon up. You think, well, instead of that, why don't I just buy, spend that part of that budget towards a bigger window,
Sure.
rather than having a skylight that will, give you that extra benefit as well. So, it's a balancing game, and if I would say that is probably one of the biggest um, exercises that you have to do, is to balance all these so that when it all comes together, it does come together.
Yeah. And yeah, being able to keep your options open to some degree definitely gives you wiggle room. If you're absolutely committed to something and it's crucial to the building, then obviously
Hmm.
if the cost of that goes up, there's kind of nothing you can do. I mean, we certainly found that with our frame, the actual cost of it kept going up, but we were so committed to that type of frame
Mm-hmm.
that we really had nowhere to go. We just had to keep
Mm-hmm.
putting the money aside into it and cutting the spec elsewhere. Okay, so you've got your plot that you wanted. The design of the house itself. Did you engage an architect, or did you come up with sort of the design details and the overall design yourself?
So I had a good long time to be able to think through how to build what house on this plot. I mean, the basic design of it, I came up over the weekend, over one weekend. Now, I had taught myself how to use SketchUp, which at the time was called Google SketchUp, which is a free 3D program. And so I could sketch things out in terms of a floor plans, the exact dimensions. I would say in design terms for a house and so on and so forth, having the exact dimensions is necessary because of such things as how do you put your kitchen? So, your kitchen, if you have an island, kitchen island and cabinets behind you, you really need a 1 meter space. So there's certain things that are not flexible. You have to have minimum distances. And the more you have, better. And so coming back to the question, I designed the house in one weekend, sort of the general floor plan, and really start to tweak and see how I could whether I could come up with a design that would meet those minimum needs and would be ultimately a product that I would be happy to live in. So using SketchUp allowed me then to actually develop this house. And over time, I was able to come up with our final floor plan as such. And no, so this initial stage, I did not engage an architect because I already had a house in mind and how I want to live in it.
Okay, and some of the key decisions like the appearance and the outside, the cladding,
Mhm.
the windows, the style of windows. How did you know what you wanted? Were you sort of do you have an example of a house that you already had seen that you really liked, or how did sort of you come to those decisions?
So I have, living in Switzerland, we've had the privilege of really visiting a lot of sort of groundbreaking homes in terms of 20th century architectural design. Our house is flat roof, this house in Graven Hill. It's very modernist. Um, it's not got a lot of frills in the sense of, we haven't got, what do they call these ceilings that have, moldings and so on. It's got none of those things. It's not really what we are interested in. And so in Switzerland, we were able to visit um, a lot of architecture designed by Corbusier, um, uh, Rem Koolhaas, I believe, was one of the other ones. So these are all really well-known international architects. And we were able to drive to various parts of Switzerland and Germany and France to really experience those spaces. And we really like modern stuff. And so from there, we have an impression of the kind of spaces we really are looking for. And then from there, I did product research of, for example, I like big windows. Okay, so, how big can this window possibly
Yeah.
be? And who manufactures a window that is 4 meters across? What are the practicalities of being able to put this on the house and the weight and so on and so forth. And so all those things came about from the initial sort of experiences of various different kinds of spaces, well-designed spaces. So
Yeah.
we, just having the opportunity to visit, um, when I was in Chicago, that was years ago, went to, um, is it the Farnsworth House? Well, it's one of the ones designed by I want to say is Le Corbusier. It's very sort of modern and no frills, and so I've had those experiences. I sort of condense them into how I want to live, what is practicable, what is possible within the budget, and I just drilled down from there. That's kind of how I did my design process.
Yeah, so you really have to. It's great to have lots of inspiration, and then like you say, you have to take your specific plot, and you just have to, I think, just start drawing something. Like you say, you've
Hmm.
got to take into consideration some of the key dimensions that you can't change, and this is why I think some of the design process can take quite a long time to go round and round the loops, because there might be some restrictions or limitations that you haven't considered, which might fundamentally change what you want. I mean, I know in ours we went through quite a few completely different
Hmm.
configurations to try and fit everything in. Um, but having that kind of starting point as a style, I think is
Hmm.
really really key, because that just drives all your decisions. And if you can have that inspiration to begin with, it really does help to sort of anchor everything and give you the sort of guidance, if you like.
Would you think it's fair to say, Dean, that you had a vision of how you wanted your house?
Well,
You guys had a vision on how you wanted to live, how that space is to feel.
yeah, we went, I mean, we approached an architect very early on, so we didn't really try and do any design work ourselves
Hmm.
beforehand. And we just went to an architect with a list of requirements. So actually quite similar to yours, really, sort of very modern style. Flat roof was definitely on our list. Simple shapes. And the internal design, actually, we didn't really go into too much detail, the architects. The concept that he came up with was more the external form of the house. And for us, this sort of cube type shape. And then it kind of we developed the internal layout
Mm-hmm.
from that. Um, but yeah, we did have a very clear view that it had to be very simple, minimalist,
Hmm.
clean lines, etc.
Hmm.
And so we were quite clear about that. And I think if you're going through a design process with an architect, then the more precise your definition, and obviously the less time you're going to spend, less money you're going to spend going round and
Hmm.
round. So
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
certainly a huge amount you can do yourself.
I think it would be. I mean, you can respond to this as well. Obviously, to me, the more you do, the more work you do at the front end to know exactly what you want, the better it is, because it saves you so much cost and uncertainty. And during the build, there's so many decisions, contingent decisions that have to be made, that if you didn't have a clear idea of exactly what you want to achieve, the how becomes really problematic.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine going through a design process with an architect, all those fees, and then at the end of it, you sort of say, actually, that's not really the style we wanted. Can we go and do that again? I mean, you just couldn't. It'd just be too costly, I think.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you did a sort of a lot of the preparation work yourselves. What about the kind of the details of the technical design? Did you engage with somebody to help you with that?
So fortunately, with the timber frame company that we hired, they did the static, the structural bearing, weight bearing structural calculations for the windows I was going to put in. They were material because my windows are large and heavy and triple glazed, and so that needed to be done. But the timber frame company has has a really good engineer who helped them uh, um, design the timber frame structure. So all of that cost actually is part of the timber frame, and that saved quite a bit of cost, I believe, and the technical details there. And I already picked out the window company that I was going to use, and in any case, it was a limited number of companies I could use because of the size of windows I have. So I made sure they talked to each other. The technical guys from the window company and the frame company were able to communicate technical details to one another. So those details, important details, were dealt with without really much more involvement from me on that side other than what I've specified. Um, so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of the um, was in terms of uh, the drawing, the technical design. I did hire an architect who used the floor plan I have, and he did not have to make any alterations. His job consisted only of um, making sure the technical details of where to, plumbing, piping, that sort of stuff was drawn out. So I had a very specific cost for that, and we've discussed, we negotiated a fixed cost. So that limited my architectural fees.
Okay. And the actual build itself, then, did you manage that part of the process yourself in terms of bringing the trades together, or did you have a main contractor?
I um, I did manage the trades myself. Um, the I did have one contractor who did a lot of work for me. He was very good. He is a big builder, and he was able to bring in people who could, or he knew people who could, for example, deal with the cladding as well as deal with the finishing on the inside in terms of the dry lining, which is what we use. We didn't use plastering, for example. But otherwise, the other trades, the plumbing, electric, flooring, we have screed, all that I'd arrange on my own, which can be stressful when the trades are busy, costs more, and
How did you approach it? How did you go about finding trades, and what was your kind of strategy, if you like, for finding your contractors?
electric and plumbing are the big ones, and I made sure I went to someone reputable, and also someone who, as we're discussing, demonstrated knowledge. You can tell if someone knows what they're talking about. So that meant that I was able to kind of trust them to carry on with the work.
Did you come across any significant issues with any contractors? Did you have any trouble with anyone?
They were not significant problems at the end of the day. Issues got resolved. I had independent contractors, and someone who's been in business for a while, but also, of size and kept up technically because, in terms of electrics, there are certainly new things, and I've put things in this house that are, um, more than just your stock standard. I mean, nothing extraordinary or, extravagant. A couple dimming system, but they were more clever dimming systems. So someone more up to date on the technical knowledge is helpful. Plumbing as well. I mean, I've used some. I've used wall hung pans and flush showers. So the shower drains to basically a plate that is flush to the tile floor. They're not, hugely technically difficult, but depending on the plumber or electrician you use, they may not be familiar with it, and they may be maybe, hesitant to do something. So those are the things you want to talk about from the outset.
A lot of attention to some of the details of those kind of things.
Yeah,
The
plumbing and
levels
electric.
and the positions of everything start to become a lot more critical because there's just
Mhm.
less wiggle room. So having
Absolutely.
someone that's willing to go sort of the extra mile, if you like, starts to become really important, doesn't it? I think.
Absolutely. And then someone with, having had experience doing some of that is really helpful, because they can also help you with avoiding mistakes.
Okay, so just coming to sort of you've gone through the build, looking back, is there anything that you'd say, actually, I'd have done that differently to how we approached it?
I might be able to come up with a few, but those are the kinds of things that once you moved in, you really want to leave behind, because you try to,
Yeah, I think if you really went over in too much detail, you just find so many things. But I think
yeah.
it
Mhm.
seems to me, and from seeing your house, you had a concept in mind. You stuck with it.
Yes, I totally agree with that. It's having that vision, because that vision informs how and what you're willing to compromise with, and what you don't want to compromise, because it tells you, right, you know what, this has to be here because that is the feature of the house. The rest of the house kind of flows depending on this specific setup. Then you don't want to compromise those things. So, having that vision helps you to prioritize what you would and wouldn't compromise based on costs or problems that you might run into. So really the vision for the house is the height of the ceiling, which is quite a bit higher, lots of daylight. And because of the higher ceiling, I also ordered extra tall doors. I mean, my doors are taller than a typical house in Britain in terms of floor to ceiling height. My doors are 2 meter 50, and a 2 meter 40 ceiling
Wow.
is a good house in Britain. So, but if I put in a low door, it's going to look funny, and because the door will only reach about 2/3 of the height of the ceiling.
Yeah,
It will
yeah.
look like I have a small door in a big room. So those were the things that I knew had to stay and couldn't go, unless otherwise it would compromise the setup and the feel of the house.
Yeah.
So those had to stay, but everything else is really flexible. I mean, for example, my cladding was not going to be originally what I have now. It was originally um, large, black painted large. But there were various issues with that, such as fire control issues, as well as just the manufacturing at that time. It was a delay of 10 weeks. I couldn't afford to delay moving in by an extra 10 weeks. And so I'd gone with a manufactured slate. Um, that solved two problems. One is that I don't have to deal with the fire issues because of a non-combustible material. I didn't have issue with getting the material. So having some flexibility is
Yeah.
necessary.
I think it's interesting you mentioned actually the sort of timescales. Sometimes you do have to make decisions based on what you can get at the time.
Mhm.
Um, and it can affect all sorts of things. I remember when we were trying to get a floor standing bath tap, the one that we wanted, um, it wasn't going to be, well, when we ordered it, it was in stock, but then they said it wasn't in stock and it wasn't going to be in stock for another 3 months. And we kind of based a lot of design decisions around that. And
Mhm.
in the end, it all worked out. But I think it's really important to highlight that if there's something you really got your heart set on, you
Mhm.
must check what the timescales are, because if it doesn't suit with everything else you're doing, it can really put a spanner in the works.
And which is why, again, I come back to the having a clear vision, because that allows you to then, having a plan allows you to adapt the plan. But if you didn't have a plan to begin with, or you have a very loose plan with insufficient detail worked out ahead of time, you run into an obstacle and you don't know how to turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so take us through a sort of a tour of your house in your mind of turning up at
Yep.
the front door and what the house would look like to a visitor as you walk through.
Because of the aspect, the facing, which does this direction of west and south, as well as what we look out to, it made perfect sense to have a wide and but shallow house. It's not very shallow, but it's shallower house. So we have it's I mean it's very difficult to in a way difficult to describe because it's so unlike maybe your typical house, but the driveway is to the far right of the plots, and you then come into the house under the overhang, and and there's also a side door as well, which is a utility room. We typically use a side door to come into through the utility room where we have the washing machine as well as the cloak room, and the dog gets clean in there, so it doesn't. So it's like a mud room where they just don't track all the dirt into the house.
Really
But
important consideration at the beginning as
yes,
well, things like that.
yeah,
We
with
we
young
haven't
children, yeah.
planned for anything like that. I mean, we kind of didn't really have space, but our entrance is a bit of an issue because if you come in with dirty shoes, you're
Mm,
basically
mhm.
straight into the house, and yeah, it's not ideal.
Yeah, so we have, but the main entrance is on the front boundary of the house. It's very wide, so we have a huge set of windows next to the front door itself. You come into through the front door. To your right would be the previously mentioned mudroom. Coming from the front door, you turn left. That's the hallway. It's a short hallway. That's another cloak area for, well, a built-in wardrobe, um, and place to store your shoes and so on and so forth. And right next to that is a stairwell that goes upstairs. But to your left is all glazing. So all along there is all windows. So it's a really good sense of space as you walk in. And then it just flows into an open plan area that is the kitchen, dining, and then at the far end of that is the lounge.
So it means that when you're in your kitchen, you're working at a cooking island, or you're sitting down having dinner, you've got this nice big full height glazing looking out over the views of Graven Hill pretty much.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And that was the plan because we knew the plot and we knew what we were looking at, and the views are lovely. Looking at the, I don't know, what, 60-year-old oak trees on Graven Hill, as
Mm.
well as the hillside, but also, just having that evening light when that comes in.
And your living space is double height effectively, isn't it? It really sort of opens up as you come into that, as you come through the kitchen area.
Yeah, our living room ceiling height is 4 meters high, which is pretty high.
Yes. Yes.
So it's pretty airy, and it's one of those features that I really like in some of these really um, big spaces. It's kind of a sense of um, walking into a church, where you get that high ceiling.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it's nothing quite as ornate, but yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to achieve. And
It's
so,
nice when you're doing this to be, you can work in 3D as well. So you don't have to just look at a 2D floor plan. You can work
exactly.
in height. You can really
Mhm.
work with that and play with that, which I think is a really nice thing to be able to do.
And one of the things, one of the reasons I planned for that is because to me, there's nothing more wonderful than having that sense of volume. So when you look at Georgian houses, when you look at these uh, Parisian apartments, they have really high ceilings and windows that go up to the ceiling. That actually is what gives you so much of a sense of space, of connected to the outside, that light. And that's what we wanted to recreate from the higher ceiling as well.
And as you mentioned earlier, you've got this huge window within that living space, which is kind of
Hmm.
north facing. So it gives you, as you said, that kind of consistent natural light.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's a sort of a focal point on both the outside of the house and the inside as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because as you come up the sort of the road towards your house, that's the it's right there.
That's right. And because the window is actually set higher up, so that's not, it's about shoulder height, and then extends all the way to the ceiling. Yeah, you see a lot of the sky. And also it actually allows for privacy for us as well, because it's set higher. When we're sat down, you can really see us as such through that window driving up that corner. But no, yeah. So that, because of that ceiling height, allowed us to have a big window, but still give us some privacy, and as well as giving a sense of connection to the outside space. You can see the weather and the clouds drifting around.
And
That's
that is a single pane of glass as well. It's a
it is.
pretty
Yeah.
big piece.
Yeah, it was I really stretched the manufacturer. I said, what is this largest single pane window you can make? And that's what we went with. It was it's a 2.7 meter wide pane of glass square.
It's the
So
sort of thing you always see on grand designs where the crane is lifting in this
yeah,
hugely expensive piece of glass, and it is one of the most nerve-wracking points of the build, isn't it?
it is. The windows caused me a lot of sleepless nights.
And you know that if, okay, say the installer drops it and it smashes, okay, it's their risk, but you know that
Mm,
it could put your program back significantly because Windows
absolutely.
particularly have a long lead time on them, so
Mhm.
it's always nerve-wracking.
It is. It is. I mean, that window had to be put in place with a robot. So yeah, there are extra costs, but those are things you will need to weigh up at the beginning of your build. You know that, anything extraordinary is going to have extra costs related to it. And such as in our case, we needed to hire a robot.
Okay, so going up your staircase onto
Yep.
your second floor, if I remember correctly, you've got a lovely kind of roof light over your stairwell, which brings in a lot of light to that area, which otherwise wouldn't necessarily have a window to it. So
Correct.
that's a lovely feature, and you've got glass balustrades. So it's all kept really nice and open.
Yeah, and because that space is enclosed, so there are rooms going in every direction. So where for for there to be a window, except for the east-facing wall. But I've decided, actually, you know what? I don't want a window there. I So instead of putting a window in there, I just put a roof light over the footprint of the stair. That just meant that it kept the whole area light, and you still have the sense of the outside because you can look up.
You've kept your landing as small as you reasonably could
Hmm.
to serve the rooms, which is something that we've also done because you do have a little bit of a dilemma as to whether you use that kind of circulation space and create
Hmm.
a bit more space there so you can enjoy circulating, but then you have to steal a little bit of space from the rooms.
Hmm.
So was that a sort of conscious decision to sort of keep that
Very
as
much, yeah.
small as
That was
possible?
absolutely. It was very conscious. So all the circulation spaces, hallway from the front door, as well as the stairwell, as well as then the landing area in the upstairs, all kept to an absolute minimum where possible. So, but they're not narrow; they're wide, sufficiently wide, so that two people can pass through each other. And the stair actually is wider than the norm as well. It's about 1 meter wide.
And then so you've got, is it three bedrooms? You
I have
have
4 bedrooms
4 bedrooms.
upstairs.
Okay.
Mhm.
So were there any kind of specific design considerations? I mean, I know a lot of self-builders probably, because you get to design your own bedroom,
Mhm.
you get to put in some nice features that you might not otherwise get. Were there any things specifically on the top floor that you were keen to do?
Yeah, so with the bathrooms, the bathrooms are generous in terms of dimension. The quote unquote family bathroom is has 2 sinks in it, um, uh, and a bathtub and a shower attached to it, and a really high set of windows. It's not overlooked, so we didn't bother glazing, obscure glaze it, but it's all tiled, just to maintain ease of cleaning. We have wall hung pans, so those are our luxuries of making it easy to maintain, looking attractive, and also for the kids to have 2 sinks. It meant that they it wasn't a friction point, and but otherwise, actually, all the rooms are fairly simple. But they're of a good size. We didn't have built-in wardrobe in the master bedroom. We didn't feel it necessary. What we did have is to have a built-in niche for a wardrobe, a later stage by a sliding doors that could go over that niche to give you a really nice clean finish. But that allowed us then to have a more substantial uh, ensuite. And again, on the ensuite, we have 2 sinks and a walk-in shower. And yeah, so that just gave you a sense of space and easy to maintain and keep clean.
Yeah, I totally agree on the easy to maintain thing. I mean, it used to drive me crazy in our old rented house. It sounds really boring, doesn't it? But you're trying to clean the bathroom. There's so many nooks and crannies, and you're trying to clean
Mm-hmm.
around all the taps and stuff. So we're exactly the same. We've got wall hung toilets, wall hung vanity units.
Mm-hmm.
The taps are wall mounted,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
all these things that just make life so much easier in terms of keeping on top of it.
Absolutely.
I think it's really important to think about how you live in the house day to day. Don't
Mm-hmm.
just think about the grand design stuff. Think about all these little things. How are you going to live every single day, and what is going to make your life a little bit easier? And that's a really nice thing to be able to do. And I sort of recall as well, maybe in your kids' rooms, the windows are quite high, which sort of gives them maybe a bit more privacy and things like that.
Yeah, there are 2 reasons for that. The windows are quite high because of building regulation, because of overlooking on the one side of it.
Okay.
So with the extra height ceiling, we were able to put the window. I mean, they're still big windows by British standards, but they're just set higher up and also extends all the way up to the ceiling, and it gives you the view of the sky. And but there's still plenty of light in the room, but you won't be able to look out below you unless you stand on a stool. And in the kids' room, same thing again, but there's a reason for that because we have that extra height in our lounge, and that 4 meter tall ceiling, it butts up to the side of the house where the kids' bedroom is. And so we couldn't have the window any lower. It's great, yeah. It meant that you can always see what's happening up in the sky.
Yeah.
And there's no, I mean, you don't really get a sense of feeling being closed in because actually you have a really wide vista of the sky.
Hmm. Okay, well, look, thanks so much for talking about all this. It's really, really interesting to talk to somebody else about it. And so just coming back to sort of, Graven Hill in general, what's your experience been like so far of living? I know it's a very early development still,
Mhm.
and there's still a lot going on, but what's your sort of early experience?
My experience has been largely positive. I came in with the understanding that there will be teething issues because there are a lot of things that are new, sort of in terms of, I mean, just from the concept of self-building. and having plots. I mean, these are things that have not been done at this scale in the UK before. And, not expect everything to be, perfectly set out. A lot of things are beautifully set up. The utilities are in the right place, and the roads are paved. I mean, those are things that are very difficult to deal with if you found a plot somewhere in a village at the end of, you've got planning permission to build at the edge of a field, for example. I mean, to get services could be very tricky and become a huge cost. And we don't have any of that here. Now, there are other issues, but to me, there's no insurmountable problems on Graven Hill. And if there are any major issues, the development company I have found to be very willing to discuss a solution. So personally, it has been largely positive. I would say 80% positive, and whatever negative there may have been has been solved. And to me, that is the most important thing. I don't think we should have unrealistic expectation that everything is done for you and that they've thought of every single possible detail. You will be disappointed.
Mm.
But if you come in with a vision and you find that you can live with strictures that have been put in place, and the strictures are, to me, very broad. So I don't think anyone should have issues with finding, having enough leeway to play in this. If you come in with that attitude, I think you will find that you can create really a lot of good in terms of the house you can build and the kind of community you can build through that.
Yeah, I think it's probably it's always good to remember that if you're coming to Graven Hill self-build, this is at the end of the day still a self-build project.
Mhm.
This is not a kind of a hand-holding project. You're still taking responsibility for building this house, but you are, like you say, you're starting from a much better um, position, if you like, than if you were out in the middle of nowhere with
Mhm.
nothing connected to it. I mean, one of our frame builders commented that they'd be more than happy to build here every time because they can drive here,
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
can park here.
Mhm.
There's roads, there's access, there's facilities from the outset. You have an electricity supply, you have a water
Mhm.
supply, sort of from the beginning, and that
Mhm.
makes a huge difference. But you've got to still have the self-builder mentality of saying, right, there's problems, we've got to solve them, we've got to keep going until they're solved, and that sort of doesn't change. So yeah, I think you're right. You still have to roll your sleeves up, I think is
You
the is the
absolutely
is
have
the
to roll
bottom
your
line.
sleeves up. I think, I think if you're the kind of people who like to start new things, have a vision of things, and you want to be able to create new spaces, new community. Um, yeah, I would say it takes kind of starter mentality. So that is going to go, you will be able to achieve quite a lot on Graven Hill if that is your general position
Yeah.
that you take with things.
Yeah. And of
But
course, there's
yeah,
multiple options. There's the full self build, which you and I have done.
yeah.
There's a range of things. There's turnkey options. There's custom build. So you can sort of choose whatever approach suits you and your circumstances as well. But like you say, if you really want to go fully in, you really can achieve something pretty special.
Mhm.
Pretty special. And so I suppose the bottom line question then is, would you recommend it to somebody else? If somebody's looking to self-build, would you say that this is a good place to come and do it?
Absolutely. I think that a space like this, Graven Hill is a pretty special site. If you look through all the possibilities around the country, for somewhere central, well connected in terms of transportation, in terms of roadways, train, even the airport is not far away. If you put all those things together, Graven Hill being such a green space, a site with so many green spaces and green spaces that will not be built on, I think it is, in my view, very, very rare. I have not seen anything like this. And it is a lovely place to live. Oxfordshire is a lovely county to live in. So would I recommend someone who is looking into self-build to look at Graven Hill more closely? Absolutely.
Mm.
I think you would do yourself a disservice if you don't, because of so many positives. But like any self-build, as you mentioned, it is still self-build. You need to be able to put in some effort to achieve what you want to achieve, be it full self-build or turnkey, whatever. It does require, more than just exchanging keys.
Yeah, and like you say, if there's a bit of advice, it's that do as much of your homework up front as
Mm-hmm.
you possibly can. Get a real solid idea of what sort of house it is that you want, and then absolutely go for it and keep going until you finish and achieved what you want. All right, thank you very much again, Simon. Thanks for your time,
Thanks,
and
Dean.
obviously see you around on site soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, big thank you to Simon for helping me out and being the guinea pig for my first self-builder interview. Really nice to talk to him about his project, and it's a really lovely house and just shows what's possible when you put your mind to it. If you want to see some more photos and some links, head on over to theselfbuildvillage.com and you can see all that extra information there. If you're a self-builder at Graven Hill, you could also log into the website and there's some additional help and resources, including a link to the Facebook group where you can chat to other Graven Hill self-builders and get some friendly help, advice and support. So next time I'm going to talk to Narina and Philip Saw, who've built a 4-bedroom house on plot 91. So really looking forward to talking to them about that. So thank you for listening and see you next time.